Is it ever too early to talk about mental health? According to the CDC, mental, behavioral, and developmental disorders begin in early childhood. In fact, in 2016, it was reported that 1 in 6 US children aged 2 to 8 had a diagnosed mental, behavioral, or developmental disorder. And in 2018 to 2019, the CDC found that 15.1% of adolescents aged 12 to 17 had experienced a major depressive episode in the past year. Welcome to Normalize the Conversation. I'm your host, Francesca Regater, and today I'm joined by author, researcher, and mental health advocate Marie Shanley, or as you may know her from her advocacy work streaming on Twitch, Mxiety. Join us as Marie shares her own experience as an adolescent struggling with her mental health, why it is never too early for an age-appropriate conversation on mental health, and the different ways we can begin the conversation with our youth.
Marie, thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited for our conversation. But before we jump in, I really just want to check in with you. How are you
Okay.
really?
How am I really? Little flustered still. Still getting into the swing of things. I recently had a kiddo. I mean, it depends on who you ask recently, but he's 5 months old, just about almost six, and everything always feels like it's like in a state of upheaval. And as somebody who a lot of my coping mechanisms for depression, ADHD, for all of it, all of my mental health issues are connected to being able to rest regularly, take time for self-care, uh, having a schedule and being organized. And kids don't know that. Especially babies. Maybe kids more so, but not babies. But yeah, so I think flustered is the best way to describe it, like a state of consistent flustering. How are you?
Oh, well, thank you for asking. And first of all, congratulations on your new baby. That's so exciting. And it sounds overwhelming when
Yes.
you need rest. And I mean, babies don't know time. They
No,
can't.
they don't know anything. They don't understand that like they were born to a mother who's a project manager, and like every hour of my life used to be written down. And yeah, no.
No.
Kids are a good reminder that like the world does not function the way that we force ourselves to function, like, hour to hour. Like, what am I doing at 1 o'clock? My appointment's at whatever o'clock. On Saturday, I'm going to get XYZ chores done. Like, kids don't know that. They just get up and exist. And hopefully they learn some stuff in the process, right? And then they hope to go to bed at a time that they're not like absolutely overtired. And you do rinse, and then you feed them. Also, feeding, highly recommend feeding kids. Um, but yeah, they have their basic needs, and that's what they're following. Uh they don't get it. It's humbling. It's a good reminder. But yeah, sorry. Go ahead.
No, you're good. It is. It's a reminder that life, I mean, we can have all the plans that we want, but life isn't following that planned schedule that we put out there. And kids are definitely a reminder of that any small thing can happen and just can't do that 1 o'clock meeting that you had expected to do.
Yep, that's exactly it. You're nailing it.
Love that. And this is why I have a dog
Oh yeah,
that I
we
need to
also have a
remember to
dog.
feed.
We also have a dog, and the funny thing is, so we have a corgi, and a lot of people, if you've seen corgis online, they're really cute. The booties are adorable, right? They are herding dogs, and the reason we got a corgi because we did all this research into like what kind of dog would work best with us and our personality, and we basically figured out that like a corgi is a dog version of both of us. They're regimented. They like if listen, if I haven't fed him at 5 o'clock, 5:02, he's in that door being like, "Excuse me." He's scratching at the door. He might like peek in like this. Okay, by 5:30 we better be outside. If we're not outside, that's a separate thing. 10:30, why are all my humans not in the same room? Like it so they're hurting dogs. So this poor dog, all this to say, this poor dog does not understand babies either, because he's literally He was made, his existence is made to follow a schedule. So again,
Oh, poor dog. My dog, on the other hand, has no schedule. She
no,
sleeps all day, wakes up randomly to drive me crazy
right,
by
right.
running around in circles for no reason.
Sure, sure.
Likes
Well,
to
that's
take,
not, there's a reason. It's running around in circles time.
yeah,
Hello.
exactly.
Hello.
Very
Yeah.
important reason.
Yeah.
I like taking all her toys out and putting them all around the apartment. I don't know why she
Mm,
has the desire to do that. And
yep.
then she goes back to bed.
Yeah.
And that's it. It's her
It's
life.
beautiful. And she doesn't pay rent.
Nope.
Yeah. Yeah.
Doesn't help clean up, makes a
No.
mess, and then gets to walk
No.
away.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
want her life.
Yeah. Yeah. But the best part is you enabled that, right? Like
That's
it's
true.
it's not, it's the, I mean, they do it on their own, but it's not for us not enabling that also. Yeah. It's
Absolutely.
great.
Other dogs are so well trained. My dog has me trained so well.
Our dog has us trained as like regimented and stuff. That sounds like he's training us. It's 10:30. Why are the humans not in the same room? I'm gonna round them up and put them in the same room. Who's in charge there? Who do you think is in charge? It's not me.
Oh, I love that. Dogs are honestly so amazing. But
Just
let's
everything perfect in this world is dog. It's
true.
yeah. Yeah.
My whole happiness when I'm having a bad day, my dog just wants, I mean, she just wants to sleep. So we snuggle. She licks my tears away. I don't know what I did to deserve her. Love her. But let's
Beautiful.
talk about you.
Non-dogs. Sure.
Although we could have a full conversation,
Oh my God.
hour-long
Easy.
conversation
Easy.
on
Next
dogs.
time. Next time.
Next podcast episode. But for now, tell us a little bit about you and your mental health journey.
Oh, okay. Well, we do have some time, so that's good. Well, so I started my mental health around like 14 years old. I was like, something's not right. I don't like other kids just kind of seem like they just like exist, and everything for me was difficult. Like maintaining feelings was difficult. Figuring out how I was feeling was difficult, and then I would be like, too sensitive, always upset, and just go to your room and figure how you're feeling and come back out when you're feeling better. And so around that time, I like kind of knew, I like went to the library. I know. I went to the library and I had looked into, because I had this hint of like, is this depression? This sounds like what people on TV call depression. And I looked into it and I was like, that sounds right. But saying that out loud made my mom super upset. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm just gonna kind of keep that in the back of my mind that like I'm weird, but there's a name for my weird. And that was comforting. Because I was able to like to even say like, well, today is a bad day. And nobody understood that. I didn't even understand that, but it was like the small, like kind of self-soothing, like little comforts. And then cut to, I moved from Russia. I lived in Russia and I moved from Russia to the US when I was 14. And I had a hard time making friends. And I was super weird because I was Russian, because I had an accent, because all the other reasons that, 14-year-olds are weird. And that kind of, made things worse, and that created a lot of anxiety. Plus I was living with my sister, because she took me in. And after a while, my sister, who was 24 at the time, was like, I can't take care of you. And I was like, great. So I moved in with my stepmom and my dad. And that is when stuff really went south, because my stepmom, I can't diagnose her, but she's not well, and her moods were always up and down, and it wasn't a stable place to be in general. And I didn't really know, like I just knew it sucked, right? Like a teenager, like, oh, my parents suck, but like I feel like more than other people's parents, because I would tell people what was going on at home. Like everybody, I distinctly remember being at like a get together with friends, and everybody was sharing like, yeah, my parents made me, do this chore or whatever. My parents made me do this. And I was like, yeah, my stepmom made me clean the toilet before I came over here because she said that I didn't deserve to go and hang out with friends. But like that was one way that I could earn that. And the room went silent. And I was like, oh, that's not what you all are talking about? And I would just retreat, and then I wouldn't, talk to anybody about what was going on, because that's the kind of stuff that kept happening. Yeah, and so then in college, my then boyfriend, now husband, found me on the floor, like I was rocking back and forth, and crying, because I didn't know at the time, but I was having flashbacks to situations that had happened in my house, and I was convinced that like my stepmom was there, and he was like, "Why don't we walk you over to the counseling center?" And I didn't want to, but long story short, I went there, and that was when my like actual healing journey began. I was diagnosed at the time with depression, anxiety, and PTSD. Um, and all for 3 years of college, because I finished college in 3 years. And the whole time I was in therapy every week and started taking medication and stuff. And so, yeah. And then cut to being more of an adult and graduating college and everything, like it was still terrible. And I remember distinctly one moment in 2013 or 2014, I was driving home and I felt so miserable. And I was like, if I ever feel better, I just want to make sure that nobody ever feels this garbage the way I do right now, and lonely and scared and not knowing who to talk to and who to trust about this, and feeling like I'm constantly a danger to myself, because I had been suicidal at that point. And like that particular day when I was driving home, I had spent the entire day crying in a supply closet, because like I was able to call my psychologist, my therapist at the time, from there. And so like I was at work though, I was in the office, 'cause that's very important. And so eventually depression, anxiety kind of totally took my career. I was I still am very much a workaholic and a perfectionist and super ambitious. And I carved this path out for myself in project management. And I was so excited because I had like created the space, and I was finally hired for what I wanted to do. And then my mental health just took a nosedive, and I ended up having a very public panic attack at work. And they took me aside and were like, "You shouldn't be working. So we'll help you like figure stuff out with insurance and stuff, but you really shouldn't be working." And sign some papers. And I remember walking out of that and being like, cool, so it's official. I have nothing left. Like my career and my work was the last thing that I thought was okay for me, and it was the thing that held me together. And I'd always wanted to write, and there was always a reason to not do it, and namely because I was terrified, and I didn't want to fail at it and all that other fun stuff. And I remember feeling so ashamed that I had to like go tell my husband, tomorrow I don't have to go to work. Isn't that funny? And at that moment I was like, how I've always said I wanted to do something about this and make sure other people felt heard. And as I would tell other people the story, it kept coming up that like every single one of my friends was going through something similar, maybe not to suicidality, but they were dealing with like, oh yeah, I had panic attacks and I also cry in the supply closet. I'm like, I don't think everybody should be doing that, but if you're doing it and you feel alone, why aren't more people talking about that? And yeah, and so that's how Mxiety was born. It was from the lowest of the lows. Like if this thing took my career, I might as well start talking about it. I have nothing to lose. And it was basically, as dark as this sounds, this is I think the right place to talk about this. But it was basically like, I have nothing to lose now, and I think I'm ready to like totally check out, because I have nothing left. I don't have a career. I don't have anything. I feel like a disappointment to everybody. I feel like a failure. I might as well do that thing that I've been terrified of doing my entire life. And so I created Mxiety.com, and I started writing and putting together resources that I had found helpful when I was at my lowest, and accumulating them on the site, and then talking about my feelings. And then that eventually I was like, how do I get people to read this? Because there's so many websites online. And my friends had started streaming on Twitch, and I love the idea that you could talk live with people about feelings, not in a way that like I never wanted to play anybody's therapist, and I still don't, but in a way that like I don't have to wait, I don't have to post a video like I would to YouTube and see if the comments will roll in. I could just talk about it live, and if somebody was walking by kind of and thought the conversation was interesting to them, they could talk back. And that's how it started. And slowly I started inviting friends to share their stories on the podcast. It was really interesting. Sometimes people sat like right out of shot. Sometimes people called in. And then eventually I started inviting mental health professionals to kind of share, be more solution oriented versus, the calls with friends and people sharing their stories were more about connecting with others. And so I wanted to have mental health professionals on to kind of talk about the solutions or the explanations for all the stuff that we've been talking about. And it's evolved to everything it is today. And I'm so grateful. And it ended up being the direct reason why my career picked back up, because now I am working in a space where my experience talking about mental health publicly is very much relevant, and hopefully helping more people as they grow up feel less alone. And I'm so grateful that I had that horrible low moment, because I wouldn't have gotten here. Not that here is like the end all. There's still lots of growing to do, but I do feel like in the past 6 years that I started Mxiety, my mental health has exponentially been better. And I think that has a lot to do with the community that we've cultivated, with being able to talk about the stuff that I wasn't talking about before. But yeah, mostly the community. I think that was a solid like 15 minutes. So I'm sorry, but you're such a good listener. Oh my God, you're just nodding. And I'm like, I'm gonna keep going then.
Because it's so important to create a space where you can just listen and let people talk, because like you said, this wasn't talked about. I mean, 14 years old and you're just being told, oh, you're too sensitive.
Right.
No?
Yeah.
This is the problem. We're not talking about it. We're not creating a space where people feel comfortable opening up about what they're going through, and we're listening and then validating instead of writing it off. I mean, you recognize those warning signs so early in life, and it wasn't till years later that you actually got the help that you needed.
Right.
If you had that community beforehand.
Right. If honestly, not just that, like, why was the onus on a 14-year-old, actually a 12-year-old at the time? So I 14 was when I moved to the US. And but yeah, why was the onus on like a 12 to 14-year-old to be like, is something wrong? I don't feel so good. Why wasn't that on the adults? And I understand it was a different time and people weren't really taught. And I don't necessarily blame anybody, even though it sucks. But I wish the adults around me were like, hey, I don't think you're feeling so good. You want to talk about it? What's going on? And then when I did talk about it, I wish they weren't like, oh, that's too much talking. Can you stop talking about it now? Yeah, it's just different.
It is. And I had that very same experience. I was 12 years old and I remember falling apart, and people would be like, oh, you're being too sensitive, grow up, get over it. But one thing my mom did, and she hates when I talk about this, so sorry, Mom, if you're listening, though you're probably not, but if you are, sorry. She would go like this. So she would do 1, 2, 3, and that meant suck it up. So we go suck it up. Anytime I was crying, I one time broke a bone and my mom was standing there. She's like, suck it up. I don't think she didn't realize the bone was broken at the time though. Like I had just fallen, and I mean, I knew in that moment. Sure. She didn't realize that fall was that bad. But the point of it is that it was so ingrained in society to just tell kids to suck it up, to get over that you're being too sensitive if you're crying, and trying to teach them that resiliency is getting through without any emotion, when resiliency is actually what our journeys looked like, right? It's falling apart and getting back up.
It's so ironic. That's such a great point. It's so ironic that this idea was like resiliency was just ignoring how you're feeling.
Yeah.
Which is not it at all, right? And that like vulnerability is absolutely the worst thing that you can do. I was absolutely the opposite. I mean, I was resilient in the fact that like, I persevered. But I don't think I was resilient when I was ignoring and pretending everything was fine. I was ripping apart at the seams. I became much more resilient once I had a name for it, once I had support, once I was talking to doctors, because then I was able to be like, I'm feeling this. Therefore, I should do this technique that I learned in therapy, or it's time to take this medication that helps me get through this panic attack, or whatever it was. That is a lot more productive and resilient than just being like, this isn't a problem, right? We're not gonna, I don't want this to be a problem, because it doesn't make the problem go away.
Exactly. It's like standing on an iceberg in the middle of the ocean and it's just slowly starting to like melt away. Resiliency isn't just standing there waiting for it to melt away and be like, oh, I'm going to ignore all this. It's fine.
Yeah.
You have to react. You have to be able to help yourself, to want to help yourself, to have the tools to help yourself so that you can get through it. And we're so, I don't know if we still are. I think society has come a long way in recent years talking about it, but it really was for so long that you just like fake it till you make it. Like fake it till you make it. But if you're not giving anyone the tools so that they can make it, so they can get from faking it to making it, you're just telling them just to pretend like you're fine until you fall apart. And then it's like, oops, you should have been stronger.
But then nobody wants to see you fall apart. So the reason that they tell you to suck it up when things aren't necessarily too bad, although I would say a broken bone is up there with really bad, but they tell you to suck it up because there's no emotional bandwidth to handle you not feeling well. So then by the time that you like legit fall apart and rip at the seams, that same person does not have even more so the emotional bandwidth to help you. So telling you to suck it up not only puts away the issue, it also makes it like unsolvable at the end of the day. Because if I don't know how to help you when you're just kind of vulnerable, I definitely don't know how to help you when you are suicidal and in crisis. Like there's no way that same person would be able to handle those two. And that's where you're going. There's a few paths in between there, but that is, if you continue to pretend everything is fine and it's not, it's not nothing that's going on. And especially if we're talking about like, chemicals being unbalanced, like stuff you cannot control, or, being in an abusive household and being a kid who feels like disempowered to do anything about it, all of those things, that's leading to one direction. And again, if you don't have somebody helping you when it's like kind of bad, by the time things are real bad, you're really screwed. And it almost it becomes like I don't know, it's like a direct route to suicidality. Obviously I'm not saying like, okay, you fell down and skinned your knee, oh, you're gonna be suicidal one day if somebody tells you to like, oh, don't cry about it. But I am saying like if something's going on with your kid and you can't find the words to figure out how to help them, you're not going to get closer to figuring out how to help them the worse that problem gets. So yeah, man, I just wish we didn't put this crap off, and we did for such a long time because we just didn't know what to do about it.
Yeah, and that's the thing. So many people don't know what to do because there's not enough access to conversations, productive conversations. Yep. There's conversations happening, absolutely. But are they all productive? Are they all giving tools? What are they doing? What's the intent behind those conversations? And how many people are a part of them is the question.
Right. And the variety of people that are a part of them, right? Because we need different resources for different backgrounds, for different ethnicities, for different, all kinds of stuff needs to be considered culturally. But cultural competence is the summarizing word. But like, yeah. So if those resources don't exist on a basic level, like we're having people right now fighting against being able to explain to kids that like, hey, if you don't feel so good, here's the signs that you don't feel so good, because there are people still convinced that telling somebody that they like here's what to look out for is what's going to make them be aware of that. Like you wouldn't be suicidal unless somebody's like, here's what suicidality looks like. And that's, I don't know who came to that conclusion. I don't think it's any research that's ever been done. Usually I'm like, oh, it's the media's fault. I can't even blame the media. I don't know how we got to there, but so if we could just like stop fighting that educating people means that they'll become whatever we educate them about. I just like, we need to stop that narrative and start having these mental health conversations with kiddos in an age appropriate way that will, bring them to a place when they're 12 to be like, hey, mom, so I'm constantly having this one thought that like I should die. I don't think other kids are doing that. What should we what should we do about that? Yeah, and then giving obviously parents the tools to be like, here's what we can do about that, even though this freaks me the crap out. Because nobody's saying that these conversations shouldn't be scary. They are scary. But what we do about it and how prepared we are for them is what matters.
Yes, and research shows that having these conversations does not increase someone's
No.
likelihood.
Nope.
And
Yep.
yet people are so against it. And it's important that we have these conversations in an age-appropriate manner. No one's going to
Yes.
go to a 6-year-old and start explaining
Right.
what suicide is.
Right.
But what if we taught them at 6 years old that it's okay to say no if you're not comfortable?
Right.
You don't have to be a people pleaser.
Yeah.
Girls, unfortunately, are taught to be a people pleaser at a young age, to stay quiet, to not say no, to just someone wants, you're coloring a fire truck and you need the red crayon and someone says they want it, you have to share. You're allowed to say not right now or no.
Yeah,
we can teach that at 6 years old. We can teach boundaries in a productive and age-appropriate manner. We can teach kids when they're in 3rd grade that if you're feeling upset, here are some things that can make you happy. What makes you feel strong? What do you like to do? Oh, you like to kick the ball?
Belly breathing. You could be doing that since you're like 3 years old. Please.
Yes,
yeah.
So many things we could be doing, and yet so many people are against it. And it just blows my mind that it's something that's so crucial, because like you said, if we don't talk about it, if we don't give kids the tools and resources they need before these warning signs are happening, but we let the warnings, you're good, but we let the warning signs start and then we kind of silence them. And then we see suicidality begin to present itself, and we're seeing suicide as the 2nd leading cause of death between ages 10 and 24, and we're acting like it's a mystery as to why.
No, we'll just say it's social media's fault.
Yeah.
Like, so social media is probably the place that kid went to try to get the emotional support that they needed this whole time. It's not, I don't think it's like, helpful, but I don't think it's the beginning of the problem by any stretch. But to kind of your point, if we start having these conversations with kiddos early, we might not need to have the tough suicide conversation later, because there will be enough of a, it's an ounce of prevention, right, is worth a pound of cure. Like, if we can do more to make kiddos actually resilient and be aware of the stuff, they might not need to get to that end line. They might not have to, because all of their needs were met before then, even if, they were uncomfortable and crappy and stuff to begin with. Something that's like super simple that is so controversial and hilarious to me is like something that's happening is like millennials are telling, the auntie, the uncle, like, hey, if my kid says they don't want, to kiss and hug you, they don't have to. And it is this like affront that like, how could if your aunt comes over and wants to give you a kiss, you better let her smooch you right on the cheek. And like, I don't know, someday I personally growing up, I hated that. And I'm not saying like that's how I ended up suicidal. I'm not connecting that. But I am saying that would have been a simple way that my parents could have enforced my boundaries. And then that maybe down the line, that wouldn't have made me more, more likely to feel unheard and unloved and unwanted, because my needs were ignored and told that they're not important because my aunt just needs to kiss me on the cheek. Like, that's what needs to happen. Go and hug your uncle because that's what he wants you to go hug him. Doesn't matter what you want. So if we can start creating a space where like, hey, I respect the fact that like my kid doesn't want to hug you right now. How about, they owe you a hug next time, like, or maybe they high five you or, get a fist bump. Like, how about we respect the fact, like, help kids feel heard and respected to start with. And then we don't have to go down the line being like, hey, why is this, kid looking for approval from some random Joe Schmo? Because They didn't, it was met far enough in advance that we don't have to go down the line.
Absolutely.
I hope that made sense. That's my soapbox, because it's so funny how people get so worked up about it. And so I've become really worked up about the opposite side of like, no, let people have boundaries.
No, it's so true. And here's like the thing, if we're telling kids like, no, you have to let people hug you and touch you and kiss you even when you don't want to, that's not a great message. And I get the whole like, oh, but it's their family. And I understand that families have different cultures and traditions, and that's a
Absolutely.
conversation you need to have with your family to find the best way to be respectful
1000%.
of boundaries and still respect your culture and how it is. So not to tell anyone what to do or not to do, but
Nope.
allowing the kid to have a voice and not feel like their voice doesn't matter. And
Yep.
whether it's through a conversation, this is why we do this. Here, how can we make this more comfortable for you? Or whether it's like, you're right, I'm going to talk to everyone else. However, the best way to do it for you, your family, your situation, it's important to let the
Great
kids
point.
feel heard, because
Yeah.
when you're being forced to do something that you're not comfortable with and there's no conversation as to why you're doing this, it really can turn into later on, well, I just have to let people touch me whenever they want, however they want. It doesn't matter what I feel. It doesn't matter if I like them or not, that this is normal. But that's not normal. It's not normal to be touched when you don't want to be touched by someone you don't want to touch you. It's not normal to feel like you can't say no, or that you don't have a voice, or that you're not heard.
Absolutely.
Those are not normal things. You deserve to have a voice to say no and for it to be respected. So having these conversations in a productive way is the key to move toward a society where people feel respected, they feel loved, they feel valued for who they are, and they're not
Absolutely.
5 years old questioning why no one cares what they have to say.
Absolutely. And I think this expands to just a lot of things in general. If we can create spaces, I think that there's sorry, I'm a little all over the place, but I think there's this idea that like, oh, this happens with every conversation, right? If we're going to talk to them about mental health, then they're going to be more likely to do this thing that we don't want them to do. If we talk to them about sexuality, they're more likely to do this thing that they're not going to do. And I think what you're touching on, the cultural importance of it, right? Doing what's right for you, like making sure that when we are asking this of people, when we are saying to Auntie, no, Jessica doesn't want to give you a hug right now. Let's find a middle ground here. Looking for that is going to be a more productive conversation than just saying like, well, my kid has boundaries, and so don't touch them and don't look at them and don't, it's not an all or nothing. And there's an appropriate way for every culture, for every age, there's an appropriate way to have that conversation. It's not comfortable, but I would argue it's just as uncomfortable to just flat out tell somebody, no, don't touch my kid because they said they don't want a hug. Take 5 more minutes, have a conversation. Would you like a fist bump instead? Can you, what would make you more comfortable hugging Auntie? Well, we give hugs because this symbolizes this thing in our family, in our culture, whatever it is, right? Creating a space where I know that takes 10 more, 5, 30 more minutes, but at the end of the day, we're creating a space where kids are more comfortable talking to each other, and you feel heard. And then the person who felt also slighted because you're doing your, woo-woo, new world, whatever crap, like there is a middle ground. We're not talking about like, oh, if I talk to a 6-year-old, I have to tell them about suicidality. That's nobody's saying that, or like, oh, I'm telling my kid not to hug their aunt. Nobody is saying that. What I am saying is that boundaries are cool. It's cool to tell a 6-year-old what their feelings are, because like according to research, most kids don't understand what anxiety is. 3, 4, 5 years old is the first time you have a comprehension that like what nervousness feels like. Until then, you might just say something like, oh, my tummy hurts. And that's a really easy thing to explain to connect that to a kid, to be like, does your tummy hurt like you ate something bad, or is it a different kind of pain? There you go. And that's a conversation that's appropriate for that child. You're still talking about feelings, but it's appropriate in a way to them, and it's appropriate, or it might be something else and it's appropriate to your culture. But whatever it is, it's really about creating a space where education, actually, I guess it is what I'm trying to say, is that education is culturally competent and is age appropriate and is all of those things. I think we can be doing a better job mediating and keep finding each other in the middle, and not just saying like, this is the new way to do stuff, so that's what everybody's doing, that's what you have to do, and too bad if you don't get it. It's all hard. It's hard to do.
It is hard to do, and it's okay to not know what to do or how to do it or where to start. And that's why conversations, that's why community, that's why resources all are so important. And if you don't know where to start, finding conversations that are happening online from people who you may trust and feel like can have a productive conversation that may help you. Looking up therapists or counselors or even like school counselors, right? That you can access, that you can have these conversations with. Even a primary care doctor can help you find a resource. There's so many resources out there. There's so many different communities out there. So if you don't know what to do, you're not alone in it. And there is support. It's all about being willing to seek that support.
It's okay to not get it. It's okay to not understand something and still be thoughtful enough to realize that like it might be bigger than you, or it might be something that you need to, dive into. It's okay. I do get afraid that a lot of our conversations around mental health, and myself as an advocate, I do get afraid that they come off as like, oh, everybody used to do everything wrong and that's why I'm all messed up now. Because that's not it. Everybody was doing the best they could, but if you know a little bit more, and if we can learn and do a little bit better, if you're against that, that's when I'm probably going to be like, okay, maybe you're the problem. The problem. But the gut reaction to be like, this is not how we do stuff, this makes me feel uncomfortable, this makes me feel upset that my grandchild isn't giving me a hug or whatever, that part's totally normal. It's what you do after that with those feelings.
Yes, absolutely. And it really is okay to not know. Like you said, it's so easy when we're having these conversations to really be like pointing the finger in every direction, because there are so many things that happen that you can see how that led to something else that led to something else. But everyone, like you said, was doing the best that they could with the knowledge, with the tools, with the resources, with what they had at the time. What we do by having these conversations is expanding that little bit of knowledge, that little bit of tools, a little bit of resources, a little bit more. And then when you choose to listen to another podcast or read another book or talk to your doctor or do something else, educate yourself in some way, you are again expanding that knowledge and tools and resources. So everyone's doing the best that they can with what they have available to them right now. But as we continue to have these conversations, finding community, like the way you've built a community, is how we can continue to expand those knowledge and tools. So we're doing the best we can every day in new ways.
I hope so. Yeah. And small asterisk is, some people might not be doing the best they can, but that's still the best they can for that moment, if that makes sense. I don't know. But like I guess what I mean is that some people are not, open to learning. They're not open to listening. And I don't want it to seem like, somebody who's like hurting you and not caring about your feelings. I don't want to necessarily normalize that to say that they're doing the best they can, even though, yes, as a statement, that is correct. Everybody's doing the best they can with what they know. But at the same time, somebody who's hurting you knowingly and unknowingly could be doing better. Yeah. Right. Even if that is what they think is the appropriate reaction, even if that, like, somebody who is, inappropriately interacting with you can do better. It's okay to say somebody's doing the best they can, and we still want them to do better than that. Those two can coexist, and that's a hard one to also kind of.
Yes.
swallow.
No, you're so right. And some people just can't do better than where they're at, and they don't want to change. They're not willing
They
to
don't want
change.
to. Yeah.
But you still deserve better. You deserve to set boundaries. You deserve to find resources that work for you. You deserve happiness and mental health and physical health. You deserve all these amazing things out of life. Just because the person or people around you in your community, in your household, in your network, whatever it is, are treating you poorly, and they can't do better than that, and that's how they are. Maybe they need support themselves. Maybe they don't want to change. I don't know what the scenario is. It's different for everyone. But you as a human still deserve better, and you're enough just by existing. And I think that's really important to make sure people know.
You summarized it so much. I feel I said it in like so many. Said it really well. You summarized it like really well. I like that. Like I tried to lay out something, and then you're like, I got you, and you picked it up and you made it all nice and pretty.
Such a great duo. Just piggybacking off you. No, but it's so important that we change that narrative for people, because it's so easy when people treat you poorly for so long to think that you deserve this, to think that that's normal, and that this is the best they can be, so this is it. But no, if that's the best they can be and it's still harmful to you, you don't deserve that. Like, you're allowed to stand up for yourself in whatever manner that looks like. If it's not safe for you to stand up for yourself in front of them and to their face, but it means setting boundaries for yourself, it means accessing different resources, whatever it means for you, you deserve to set boundaries that make you feel loved and heard and protected. You deserve to feel safe and secure and seen. You deserve all of it. It doesn't matter if someone's treated you. It matters if someone's treated you poorly for so long, but it doesn't mean that that's all you deserve. Yeah.
My rule of thumb is explanations over excuses. And that's, that goes both ways, right? Somebody saying, sorry, my anxiety is the reason that I treated you like crap. That's an excuse. That's not an explanation. An explanation would be, my anxiety makes me do those things. You still didn't deserve for me to, react to you or, blow up like that at you. So, but that goes the other way. Are you excusing somebody's behavior, saying like, oh, that's all they know how to do because that's all they understand? And are you excusing away them treating you poorly? Or is that your explanation for why they're doing it, but you still expect them to be better, right? And that's the explanation part of it. And it really works both ways.
It does, because it's so easy to like blame your mental health. It is so easy.
Oh,
yeah. Right? I can so easily all the time like, sorry, I'm in a depressive episode. Like, I can't control it.
Deal with it. Yeah. No, but you can't. And you can't.
Yeah.
I do want to emphasize that you can't. And there are plenty of mental health issues that like you cannot control this certain like I just interrupted you. That is a part of my ADHD that I am so self-conscious about. And it's absolutely something that like every day of my life, I am aware of it and I hate it. And I can tell somebody, and I have said like, I'm sorry I interrupted you. It's a compulsion thing that is brought on by ADHD. And I'm so sorry. You don't deserve for me to interrupt you. And I promise I don't do it because I don't respect you or respect the fact that it's your time to speak. It's just really hard for me, but I promise you I'm trying to do better. And it's not a reflection of you. That's more an explanation than just being like, yeah, well, I interrupt people because I have ADHD. So that's how the conversation's going to go with me. Too bad.
Yes, exactly. It's so easy to just want to be like, write it off so quick and not give an explanation. And not that anyone owes anyone an explanation.
No.
But it's so important that, like, for me, I might not realize it till like a day later or a couple hours later when it finally like sits in. I'm like, oh, I just totally blamed my mental health. And although that's a symptom that I'm experiencing, that person didn't deserve the way I treated them, and I should now apologize and explain why I behaved that way and ask them how it felt for them and figure out what we could do in the moment next time if that happens again. Because it's very likely to happen again if I'm in the middle of a depressive episode and I am 3, 4, 5 weeks into feeling super depressed, and you try to talk to me at a moment where I don't want to talk and I'm just going to fall apart and scream and cry and just can't get up. it's likely to happen again if I hit another depressive episode like that.
Right,
So
right.
how can I be respectful of how that might make you feel? How can you be respectful of how I'm feeling in that moment? And how can we support each other through it? And that conversation's very hard to have. And
It is. And
I've
you can't, sorry, go ahead.
no, go.
No, I was just gonna add that like an important piece is you cannot have that conversation while you are in that moment,
Yeah.
while you are depressed, because it's not going to be productive. But if you realize it 2 days later and you're like, I'm in a better headspace and I feel like crap that I did that, it's okay to go back to that person. And it's also okay for them to be like, no, you know what? I'm done with you doing that to me. That's tough. And that's a separate conversation. But like you probably in that moment won't realize that you messed up because that's not where your mind is, but that doesn't mean you can't work on it later or next time or when you are not in the middle of a depressive episode, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely. And I have two friends who like pros at this with me right now. Like they really know what to do because we've had so many conversations. And I have Bella, I love you. One time we went to Target and we ran into somebody and I ended up having a full panic attack. And like when we got home, I was on the floor like shaking and crying. And Bella knew that like if you like touch me at that moment, I'm just gonna freak out. I'm not, I don't want to be touched, but I don't want to feel alone. So she just sat down next to me and just sat there like in silence. And then when I finally got to a point where I could like breathe again, she was like, "Do you want to breathe together?" And I was like, yeah.
10 points. 1,000 points. 1,000 friendship points. Everybody gets brownies. That's amazing.
Yeah, but like that was through conversation and seeing it happen before and her not knowing what to do and then asking, what could I do? Me explaining that I didn't mean to scare her in any way or just like interrupt the entire day or whatever we were doing. But it comes back to both parties being willing to listen to each other, respect each other, and do what's right. And whether what's right is not spending time together anymore because they can't support you and you can't support them in the way they need, that's one option. Whether it's learning what to do, what not to do, warning signs, how to be there, how to listen, when to step away, that's a whole other option. So it's up to everyone to figure that out for themselves. But those conversations, at least specifically in my experience, can help you feel not alone and help them feel like, okay, I didn't do anything. I didn't cause this. Right. Now I can just sit here and in X amount of time, we're going to be able to continue and have another conversation about it. And we'll both feel seen and loved and valid and valued.
Yeah, I don't know what to do. This is freaking me out. I don't understand it, but I'll get this if you sit down and explain it to them, they will understand it eventually and give them space to be like, yo, that was cool. That was totally okay. That it was scary. When I have panic attacks, I get that it's like super scary for you. I also cannot help you deal with that fear in the moment, but like trust me that I want that to be a better experience for both of us. So let's talk about what you can do next time. Because
Exactly. And when you're not ready to have the conversation, you also don't have to yet either. I had someone text me the other day and they're like, I really just want to talk and figure out like where we are. And I was like, I respect you and your headspace. And I am so sorry if I'm causing questions in your mind. I am not in the headspace to talk about anything right now. I went through a very, very long, I think like yesterday I started to come out of it, but really long, like depressive episode where I could not. Someone pulled me out of class because I was like hyperventilating, crying, couldn't turn like on my camera. Like I had to get pulled out of class, could not function. Like I had gotten really low and someone wanted to have a serious conversation with me. It was not going to work. It was not going to be good for either party. I wouldn't be able to talk. I was just in tears, unable to catch my breath for weeks at a time. So it's important to realize that it's okay if you're not ready to have a conversation, if you can recognize you're not in the headspace and let them know that you value them, right? Like I value you and your boundaries and your feelings and all of it. And I'm not in any way trying to hurt you.
Listen, if we have this chat right now, it's going to end up in the exact place where we are right now. We're both going to be upset, misunderstanding each other. We're both going to be like tired, angry. It's going to be so much more productive if you give me like a tad more space. But And in all defense, like, I get that comes from the other side. Like, I get that comes from anxiety of like, what if this person never talks to me again? What if this person doesn't want to do better? Am I losing this friendship? I get being stressed about all of that. But either way, you have an answer. That's what I kind of like. If somebody says, no, I don't want to talk to you about this, and then they never follow up, that's your answer. If somebody says it doesn't feel good, it's not closure, but like that is your answer. If somebody says, yeah, we'll talk about it, and then like you said, you're like, you know what, I don't think I can support you through this, that's your answer. Like, take information that you are given, even if it's not exactly like what you want it to be, right? Like, would it be better if that person texted you and they could immediately, you guys could resolve everything and bim bam, you guys are friends again and everything's great? Absolutely. But if you never, I hope not, for the sake of your friend and you and everybody, if you never come around to being like, yes, I want to have this conversation with that person, as much as it sucks, like they have their answer. That like, it's not a relationship that's going to be repaired, and that blows. But now, if you can free yourself to accept the information that you are given instead of like looking for what you want, you will end up more open to stuff that is out there, that is to somebody who is available to talk to you in a space, in a way that does make sense to you, versus just being like, well, this person never talked to me, so she's an asshole and everybody's an asshole and people with depression suck and all of that other stuff. It's all information. And then the other thing is, you can move on, right? Like you can you have your answer, and you can do what you need to do with it, whether that's like start looking for a new friend or whatever it is. And that's like heartbreaking, but
that's the thing. It's listening to the information. If they're saying they're not answering you, or they say, I don't want to talk, or I'm not in the space right now to have the conversation, listening to the information you're given and then deciding how you want to respond, whether it is with no response, whether it is waiting, not waiting, that's completely up to you. But paying attention to the information you're given is so important, because someone really just may not be in the space to have that conversation, or they may not want to have the conversation. And the way they write that text or answer that phone call or whatever it is going to give you that understanding.
You have your answer, right?
Yeah. It's so important. As we are running out of time, how has it been almost an hour? What is right? That's so fast.
Yeah, I feel like we've been everywhere too. In like 50 minutes, we've went around the hill and around the mountain, and like we're back again. It's really cool. Thank you for chatting with me and going a little deep and a little shallow and a little deep again. That was neat.
Thank you so much for listening to Normalize the Conversation. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review. This podcast is an initiative of Inspiring My Generation, focusing on normalizing the conversation, bringing education and awareness to the forefront, and amplifying global voices to spark change and hope. Inspiring My Generation is a 501c3 nonprofit organization on a mission towards suicide prevention through awareness, conversation, education, and support. Connect with us on Instagram at Inspiring My Generation, and visit our website inspiringmygeneration.org to learn more about our work and how you can make a difference.